Hello, investors and traders, and welcome to the Midweek Report. I'm AJ Monte, and this is a daily candle chart of the Dow Jones Industrial Average ETF, ticker symbol DIA. We are within the final 2 minutes of trading, and as you can see here, we got this little bit of a candle known as a doji. A doji is a sign of indecision. Those dojis, also with spinning tops, are usually found at pivot points. And so what we have here is a possibility of a pivot lower. Now, I still have a downside target on DIA right there at 425.51. So I'm going to keep that in place because we have an open gap right there. Looking at IWM, IWM is not having a good day. This candle right here is a bearish harami. That too is bearish 80% of the time. So my downside target on IWM is still set at 220.23. Notice down below we have a drop in volume on the way up. That tells us that the buyers are getting tired. And with that, we see a full-fledged pivot on the CCI down there, getting very close to that red line, which will, once it's crossed, generate a sell signal. So that's IWM. Again, downside target right there at 220.23. We're coming into the final seconds here as we go to 𝐞𝐞𝐞. That is what we're looking at, a shooting star. And here we go. Markets are officially closed. That shooting star is also a bearish candle. A shooting star with a long shadow above the candle. Again, bearish 80% of the time. We have a gap below the market here. We have another open gap below the market here. Notice I made a reminder to myself to keep an eye on the volume, and I drew that to make sure that we're looking at a lower volume from the highs right here on Friday. So we could see the volume is not anywhere near where it was on Friday, and the stochastic and the CCI are both overbought. Once the CCI starts to pivot lower, it's at a fairly high overbought reading right here. You can see it's right in line with what we saw back here in December. Once that starts pivoting lower, we will most likely start to see some selling action coming in to the market. So my downside target for the Q is still in place at 510.16. Looking at SPY, this is the S&P 500 ETF. Again, another shooting star right at that resistance high right here. There we go on, guess what? Lower volume. So the buyers are losing momentum on the way up. You can see we have a little bit of a hinge there on the CCI as it's in an overbought condition, just like the stochastic here is an overbought condition. So now we have a gap below the market here, another gap below the market here, and guess what? Another gap. So we have 3 gaps that still need to be filled. And if you're not familiar with gaps, they more or less act as price magnets. You could see that back here, we had an open gap, and I had my downside target here, and I extended my downside target here. It took a while for that gap to fill, but it eventually filled. Now, the beautiful thing about gaps is once they fill 80% of the time, which is what happens, they tend to reverse and go the other way once the gap has filled. And so that too is, again, going to act as price magnets. So we might get this gap to fill up here, and then maybe a little bit of a bounce, then possibly another gap filled down here, and then a little bit of a bounce. And as we zigzag our way down, you'll most likely see bouncing occurring at these gap fill points. So keep that in mind. Now, a couple of weeks ago, and even in the months prior, I've been talking about ABCD patterns. Here's what an ABCD pattern looks like. Once we pivot lower, you will be able to put an A there, which generally brings us to a lower B. Once the pivot B has formed, we will most likely see a bounce to C. And once that pivot forms there, we generally see a lower D. Okay, so those ABCD patterns work on the way down as well as on the way up. So get in the habit of recognizing them. And you have to understand, folks, our percentage of accuracy is extremely high when it comes to price targets. Each one of these diagonal lines here are previous price targets that were drawn before the candles showed up. Okay, now we have an open target here. We already hit this one down here. So this is the only target that's still open. I think there's a high probability that we will see that happen. And one of the reasons I say that is because if we go to the VIX, you'll see that this downside target back here was filled, but I have a longer term upside target now up here around 27. Notice that little candle right there is very close to a spinning top. And down below, look what's happening with the CCI. It went from a downward sloping movement to sideways. So we have a hinge there. That is also in an oversold condition. When it goes below the green line, it's oversold. And notice what happens when that CCI tends to go oversold like that. What happens shortly thereafter? Rallies in the VIX. And so we are in a third oversold condition since November. Therefore, again, the probability of a VIX rally is very, very high. And if you're not familiar with the VIX, understand that for the most part, the VIX is inversely related to the S&P. So if I'm thinking the VIX is going to rally, what do we have to say about the S&P? It's most likely going to drop. Tonight from 6 to 7 Eastern Time, we are having our rapid fire stock analysis session where I'm going to go over 50 stocks in 60 minutes. And as a bonus, I will be highlighting some trading strategies for our members on how to trade some of these stocks in the way I would trade them. Now, remember, the audience submits the ticker symbols to me, and I give them my price targets on those individual stocks. I could do that for you as well. If you like, just sign up for the 15-day free membership, and you could plug right into this rapid fire session, or you can listen to the recording if you are not able to make it live from 6 to 7. I have an 82.2% hit rate, which is the best in the world, and that is what we're going to be doing tonight. In fact, last week, we have a good percentage that have already hit in just 1 week. And so our members are very happy, especially those who are trading in line with those price targets. So that is it, folks. I'll talk to you on Friday on the weekly market report. Thank you for liking and sharing and commenting, especially. We had a record number of comments last Friday, and YouTube Analytics is telling us that we have a 17% increase in the number of views, and that's all thanks to you liking, sharing, and subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Every time you do that, it drives the algorithm and gets us on the menu. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll talk to you later. So long.